She raised her glass and said, "To freedom, and finally being honest with ourselves." The clink of crystal, the faux laughter, the smug glances passed between people who used to eat my food, sleep in my house, and pretend I mattered. Across from me, 3 seats down, was David, my so-called friend. His shirt collar still had the faintest outline of lipstick. My wife's. I'd seen it a week ago on our bathroom sink, same shade. I had scrubbed it off with bleach, even though I already knew. Our daughter, lifted her glass and smiled as she added, "Mom deserves to be happy. You've made her miserable long enough." I didn't say a word. Not to them. Not to him. Not to her. I just picked up my glass, drank the last swallow of my scotch, wiped my mouth slowly, and said with a calm so deep it startled even me, "You'll all have what you deserve. I promise you that." That line didn't land with them. Not then. They were too busy celebrating my replacement. Too high on the thrill of betrayal dressed up as liberation. But it was the last dinner they'd ever eat with me at that table. That night, I left. No shouting. No scene. Just a zipped duffel bag, a spare set of keys, and one last look at the family portraits she hadn't yet taken down. Photos that were lying more than any of them ever had. I moved into the small guest house I'd renovated last year as a side project. Funny, she'd said it was a waste of time. No one's ever going to use it, she'd laughed. Well, now it had a tenant, the man she underestimated. I filed for divorce at 8:06 a.m. the next morning. My attorney already had the papers prepared. We'd been drafting them since the first time she worked late and came home with her blouse buttoned wrong and a scent she'd never worn around me before. I wasn't a fool. I just played one long enough to be underestimated. She didn't even notice I was gone until mid-afternoon. I know that because I disabled the security notifications. The lock stayed the same, but I'd taken the key fob. She texted me around 3:12 p.m. "Where are you? Did you go sulk somewhere again?" No punctuation. No worry. Just irritation. My only reply was the tracking number for the divorce packet her lawyer would receive by courier within the hour. Look, I know most of you listening probably think I should have blown up, thrown a chair, screamed across the table. But here's the thing. You only do that if you still want them to see you. I didn't. Not anymore. I wanted them to feel me, but only when it was too late. And yeah, more than 90% of people hear stories like mine and never subscribe. But it's your support that lets stories like this reach someone who needs to hear it. If you're one of those people, hit the subscribe button. It means more than you think, and it tells the team to keep going. Back to the story. I knew the moment I walked away that I'd been prepping for it longer than they'd been plotting behind my back. Every signature she gave me just to get it over with. Every trust fund update she didn't read. Every clause in every contract that she laughed off because he's just overthinking. I had kept receipts. I had built the net, and now the spider was walking free while they celebrated inside the web. The worst part? The look in my daughter's eyes. Not pity. Not guilt. Just amusement. Like she'd finally joined the adult club by choosing her mother over me. She leaned back in her seat, sipping wine she wasn't even old enough to drink legally, and said it again. "You should be happy for her, Dad. She was miserable with you." I remember watching the candlelight flicker on her face, thinking, "You used to be my greatest joy." Now, she was an echo of her mother's pride, amplified by youth and Instagram quotes. That night, I removed her name from the trust draft. Quietly. I didn't even hesitate. I stared at the document for a full minute before blacking out her line. It had been written in ink. I replaced it with something more permanent, a clause. A clause that said conduct matters. Because love? That died long ago. But respect? That's enforceable. She told her friends over wine and arugula salad that I just walked, like a dog off its leash. No resistance, no last words, no pathetic begging. One of them clinked a glass and said, "Well, that was easy." And she grinned. This big, showy grin like she'd just won a custody battle she hadn't even earned. "He couldn't handle the truth," she said. "He just walked." What she didn't know was, I didn't walk away, I walked ahead. The next day, her lawyer sent a demands letter. Not a polite inquiry, not a negotiation. A list. Bolded items. "Our client is requesting sole ownership of the primary residence." It began. Then came the alimony figures, car division, spousal maintenance for emotional damages, and of course, control of shared passive income assets, including beach rentals, the downtown duplex, and my pension portfolio. Like she was dividing up a buffet tray. It was cute. The letter they got in return wasn't emotional. No threats. No sarcasm. Just one page, single-spaced, on heavy off-white paper. No firm branding at the top. Just a name, Leonard S. Holbrook. No one on her side recognized it. No LinkedIn, no Facebook, no flashy website with a smiling "Meet Our Team" section. Just a signature and a watermark seal at the bottom. Leonard has no Twitter account. Leonard doesn't tweet. Leonard executes. He's been my attorney for 17 years. More importantly, he's the executor of the estate I inherited from my grandfather. The one we never talked about. The one I never added her name to. She once called it that boring legacy crap and waved off any offer to learn about it. I'll let you be the estate nerd. She laughed, signing the tax forms I handed her without reading a word. That trust holds 7 properties, a renewable energy stake, and partial ownership in a holding company that feeds off infrastructure grants. On paper, it looked like I was a mid-level civil engineer with a tidy pension. In reality, the estate's cash flow could quietly fund a congressional campaign. She called all of it community wealth, as if she built a single nail of it, as if showing up late to foundation galas in a rented dress and giving a 2-minute speech made her a stakeholder. She was under the impression that marriage gave her default access. That assumption is about to age poorly. Holbrook's letter stated the following. All relevant assets under the Wellington Trust are non-marital, predating both union and cohabitation, and remain bound under irrevocable governance by executor's clause. As such, they are exempt from community property divisions under the 2006 amendments. She read that line 3 times before calling her lawyer in a panic. They asked for clarification. Holbrook sent over a spreadsheet, 97 pages, outlining property flows, shell incorporations, grantor lineages, and notarized logs going back to 1989. Each entry was time-stamped, cross-referenced, and backed by tax records. My wife hadn't seen that spreadsheet before because she never asked. She only saw beach vacations and bottle service. She saw outcomes, not origins. Her lawyer called mine and tried to negotiate. Holbrook was polite but firm. "You're welcome to proceed with your filing," he said. "But do understand, your client is engaging with an individual who signed away the rights to every relevant channel years ago. Willfully, with full legal awareness." She didn't know that either. The boring paperwork she joked about 2 years ago when I asked her to sign the Form G12, A for trust succession planning, wasn't boring at all. It was the trigger. That signature removed her authority from the advisory board. It was supposed to be temporary, just for tax optimization. That's what I told her. I even thanked her for being cooperative. She rolled her eyes and said, "Just get me a beach drink when this is over." Now the beach house is not hers. It never was. They tried to argue that some of the assets were commingled. Holbrook didn't flinch. "Show me the documentation. Show me where funds were transferred from marital accounts into restricted estate pools." They couldn't, because she never contributed. Not 1 cent. The foundation paid her credit cards for charity events. She thought that meant it was hers. She thought access was ownership. Smugness turned to silence. The shift didn't happen loudly. There was no courtroom drama, just a growing awareness. A slow, creeping realization that the man she betrayed wasn't reacting. He was executing. She showed up unannounced. No knock, just the jangle of her key, one she'd apparently forgotten to return. The door creaked open and there she was, in oversized sunglasses and a trench coat, like she was doing me a favor by arriving at all. She barely looked around the guest house I was staying in, just sniffed the air like she expected it to smell like mildew and regret. "Nice," she said, with that same sarcastic lilt she inherited from her mother. "Minimalist, I guess." I set my coffee down. Didn't offer her any. Didn't ask why she came. I just waited. She sat across from me like it was a job interview she was going to ace with sheer confidence. Legs crossed, arms folded. Then she exhaled sharply through her nose and said, "Look, I didn't come here to argue. I just think it's sad that you're throwing everything away because of one mistake." I didn't blink, just stared at her, watching my daughter echo words she didn't come up with on her own. She kept going. "You should be grateful she stayed with you as long as she did, Dad. Seriously, you've always been, closed off, distant. Mom gave you everything she had." There it was. That strange, detached tone she used when she was trying to sound mature. Like she was reading from a script written by someone who once loved me and forgot why. "She gave me everything?" I repeated. She nodded. Confident. "She built your life with you." I smiled just slightly. "No." She watched it. Occasionally decorated it. "But build it?" "No." She rolled her eyes so hard her neck cracked. "Okay. You want credit. Great. Congratulations, you built something. But that doesn't mean you get to punish everyone just because your ego's bruised." I didn't answer her right away. Just leaned forward, folded my hands, and looked her dead in the eyes. I changed my will last week. She scoffed instantly. Sure, Dad. I mean it. Yeah, okay. You were in it, I said slowly. Not anymore. That wiped the grin off her face. She blinked twice and shifted in her seat. What are you talking about? I mean, you were a beneficiary. Not anymore. That's what I'm talking about. The silence that followed was dense. Not explosive, not angry, just cold. The kind of silence where realization creeps in like water under a locked door. She leaned back. You're kidding. No. You'd really do that over this? I didn't flinch. You told me I should be grateful your mother cheated on me. You toasted their affair like it was a wedding announcement. And now you want to talk things out. That was your talk. She stood up. You don't mean it. You should assume I do. Mom says you're just trying to scare me. Tell your mom the trust revision was already filed. Tell her the only person authorized to reverse it is Holbrook. She paused mid-step. That weird old guy? Executor of the Wellington estate. You know, the one I mentioned during that boring dinner 2 Christmases ago. The one you ignored while scrolling your phone. You're cutting me out? Completely. Conduct clause, I said. Look it up. I wrote it myself. Holbrook filed it. It's clean, airtight, and irrevocable unless I sign an appeal. Which I won't. Her face shifted then, not in anger, but confusion. Like someone told her gravity was optional, and she jumped too hard. I'm still your daughter, she whispered, like it was supposed to carry weight. You are, I said. But you chose a side. I respect that. Sincerely. I just don't owe you rewards for it. She didn't slam the door when she left. That would have required conviction. She closed it like she was hoping I'd call her back. I didn't. Because that wasn't a warning. It was a verdict. The first time they tried to freeze one of the accounts, it bounced back with a single phrase stamped in red. Non-marital asset. Trustee oversight only. That was the first crack in their smile. Her lead attorney, a suit named Kessler who wore power ties and talked like a man auditioning for a crime drama, brushed it off as a clerical issue. These things happen, he told her. They forget to update status after filing. But I could already see the shift in his posture. A little more rigid. A little less confident. They tried again. This time for a joint property we'd acquired together, or so she thought. The lake house in Rensley Bay. She loved that house. Took selfies on the dock. Hosted her book club there while I was out of town. Claimed it was our retreat. But the deed didn't say our names. It said Everfield Legacy Trust, subholder B7. The trustee? Leonard Holbrook. Who the hell is Leonard Holbrook? She snapped at her team. She'd met him. Twice. Called him the estate nerd with corpse energy. But that was when she thought he was just a glorified accountant. Now she was learning that Holbrook didn't just manage the books, he owned the locks. Every time her attorneys filed a demand, it returned with some variation of the same theme. This property is held in a trust that predates marital union. This asset is overseen by an executor and falls outside family court jurisdiction. Claim denied under Section 3.2 of the Governance Clause. Kessler started sweating. They sent paralegals to search for commingling, digging into bank records, hoping to prove that marital funds had been used to maintain or improve the properties. But they found nothing. Not a dime from our joint account ever touched the trusts. Because I never let it. Everything had been structured through LLCs, some held by parent holding groups registered in different states, others offshore. Fully compliant, fully legal, and fully out of reach. I'd started building it that way long before she ever grew bored of monogamy. She laughed when I told her I was restructuring assets after my father passed. You act like you're some oil tycoon, she said. We live in the suburbs. Yeah, and oil doesn't announce itself in the driveway. The moment of collapse came on a Tuesday. Kessler was pacing during a video call, flipping through printouts like they'd rearranged themselves into a miracle. There's got to be a back door, he muttered. There isn't, I said. I wasn't even in the meeting. Holbrook was. Calm, deliberate, with the patience of a man who'd already outlived 2 probate judges and half a Senate committee. She finally asked the question that should have come years earlier. How is this even legal? Holbrook didn't look up from his tablet. Because you never asked what he owned, he said. Only what you could take. Silence. Long enough to stretch. Long enough to hurt. I imagine that's when she finally understood that while she was spending weekends with David and complaining about how I was always at the office, I was signing things. Not romantic letters. Not angry texts. Just documents. Deeds. Contracts. Things with real signatures and irreversible consequences. She once said, I don't need to understand the financial stuff. That's your thing. And I agreed. It was my thing. And now it wasn't hers. Her attorney finally admitted it aloud. Most of what we assumed was joint, isn't even reachable. They tried to argue unfairness, that the division was lopsided, that no spouse should walk away with so little after so many years. But Holbrook, unblinking, repeated the phrase that would become the cornerstone of their unraveling. He did not hide assets. He simply built them where you chose not to look. The room went quiet, because you can't fight a ghost map when you never even knew there was a map. She'd already started referring to it as her beach house. Not the family house, not Dad's place. Just hers. In text messages to friends, she called it the wedding spot. On Instagram, she posted a photo of the dock with the caption, "Can't wait to say I do right here, ring waterwave." She never asked, never confirmed, just assumed. It made sense in her head. The house had been part of every summer she could remember. Sunburns, s'mores, old VHS tapes in the den. When she was 16, I let her bring friends there for the first time. At 18, she called it her safe space. And when she turned 23 and got engaged to a man I had never met, she announced, without asking, that the wedding would be held on the back lawn. I didn't respond to that text. She took that as permission. 3 weeks later, she and her fiancé drove down for the weekend to plan a walkthrough. They packed champagne, a drone for overhead shots, and a playlist of acoustic covers for the ceremony preview. But when they pulled into the driveway, something was off. First, the gate wouldn't open. Not the keypad. Not the remote clicker she had kept. The code had been changed. She tried 5 different combinations. Nothing. Then they noticed the mailbox was gone, completely removed, post and all. In its place was a concrete slab with a black metal plaque. Crescent Foundation, private estate. Not open to public. Trespassing will result in civil action. Her fiancé laughed. Thought it was some kind of prank. She didn't. She called me 6 times in a row. I saw each call flash across the screen. I watched them, one after the other, without lifting a finger. She left a voicemail on the 5th attempt. "Dad, this isn't funny. You need to call me back. We're locked out of my house." There it was again. My house. I didn't respond. Not by phone, anyway. An hour later, she received an email. Not from me, from Holbrook. Forwarded, with a brief message at the top. "Message per your father's instruction." Beneath it, a single sentence. "Disrespect has a cost. Consider this payment due." No emotion. No lecture. Just currency settled. She cried on the side of the road for 30 minutes. Her fiancé paced the gravel, trying to figure out how to spin the situation without admitting she had never actually secured the venue. When they got back to the city, she posted nothing. No photos. No captions. Just silence. What she didn't know was that the Crescent Foundation was something I'd quietly established 2 years prior. Originally designed as a philanthropic arm for scholarships and coastal preservation, it also served a second purpose: legal ownership transfer for certain properties I didn't want tangled in family disputes. Once the divorce was filed, Holbrook activated Clause 8.4c, which allowed immediate property reassignment to the foundation if the listed family member, her, was found in breach of the respect and conduct provision, tied directly to public statements or actions that could damage legacy assets. She had triggered it herself, on video, no less, when she laughed about cutting him out of everything once Mom gets the house. A friend recorded it. The clip made it to a group chat. Someone forwarded it. I didn't ask who. It didn't matter. That one sentence was enough. Holbrook filed the paperwork the next morning. Locks changed. Utilities restructured. Tax ID transferred. Ownership revoked. She called her mother in a panic. Her mother called me, screaming. I didn't pick up either. Because the thing they never understood was this: legacy isn't just money. It's memory. It's the stories passed down through property lines and bloodlines. And the moment they treated both like trash, they became ineligible to inherit either. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. He barged into her office without knocking, something Kessler never did. Not during strategy calls, not during divorce prep meetings, not even when her mother had a health scare mid-deposition. But that morning, he threw the glass door open mid-conference and nearly knocked over the assistant's coffee tray. His face was pale, eyes wild, jaw clenched like he'd bitten into live wire. She was mid-sentence, presenting next steps to her litigation team. Designer heels up on the edge of her desk, latte in hand, fake calm flowing like a perfume commercial. When he stormed in, she looked up, visibly annoyed. "Kessler, we're in the middle of..." He cut her off with 4 words that shattered the room. "Do you realize who's rewritten his will?" She blinked, stunned. "What are you talking about?" He didn't wait for her to stand. Just reached into his briefcase and tossed a thick, bound folder onto her desk. It landed with a hollow thump that made the woman beside her flinch. "That he said, pointing, is what he filed last week. With Holbrook. And with the county. She picked it up slowly, thumbing through the cream-colored pages like they were a foreign language. But the cover page said it all. Last will and testament of Grant W. Elliott. Filed and witnessed, Rev. 3, dated April 18th. Effective immediately upon filing. Her name was not on it. Neither was her daughter's, or her siblings, or her elderly mother, who used to rely on Grant for medical cost coverage. Instead, a single bullet list appeared under beneficiaries. Crescent Foundation, Montrose Scholarship Endowment, Atwood Veterans Housing, Legacy Conduct Panel, as overseen by Executor L.S. Holbrook. Under executor rights was a clause she had never seen before. It granted Holbrook's sole discretion to release or deny funds from residual estate channels based on merit, need, and observed conduct consistent with the stated legacy ethics of the deceased. She slammed the document shut. This can't be legal. Kessler let out a short, humorless laugh. You signed the foundational structure 3 years ago, during tax consolidation. You remember that? Her mind scrambled. She did remember signing something back then, some boring trust reallocation paperwork. She was in a rush, late for a hair appointment. She joked that it was just nerd stuff and waved him off when he tried to explain the terms. You said, and I quote, "Whatever keeps the IRS away, Grant. Just tell me where to sign." Kessler flipped to the signature page, pulled it out of the sleeve, and held it up like a trophy. Her penmanship, neat and practiced. Witnessed. Notarized. She stood slowly. You're telling me that he can decide if I get anything? I'm telling you, Kessler said, that unless Holbrook personally authorizes a disbursement, you have no legal claim to a cent. What about contesting? He gave her a long, pitying look. You want to contest a structure you signed into existence? You want to stand in court and argue that you didn't read the document you voluntarily executed with benefit during the marriage? She opened her mouth. He cut her off. You won't just lose. You'll bury your credibility in front of every judge who sees the case. She collapsed back into her chair. The room was quiet, the call still active, her staff watching the fallout like bystanders to a building collapse. How did this happen? She whispered. Kessler didn't answer right away. He just shook his head and sat across from her. He was playing chess. You were dancing at your affair party. This didn't happen last week. It started the day he walked away. She tried to gather herself. Okay, well, the foundation then. I'm on that board, right? He didn't say anything. Just slid the final page across the table, the board of trustees list. Her name wasn't there either. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten post-it, unmistakably Holbrook's cursive. Legacy is not automatic. It's earned. Signed, as always, Executor. She tried to pull her thoughts together. Tried to remember if she'd ever read any of what she'd signed. If she'd ever once listened to the meetings she'd called a waste of a Saturday. She'd skipped 2 of the quarterly reviews. Sent her assistant to the last one. And now? The legal victory she thought was inevitable had morphed into a beautifully laid trap. One she helped build, brick by signature. The room stayed quiet. Because there was nothing left to say, she called Holbrook directly. No assistant. No appointment. Just a raw, impulsive call in the middle of the night. She didn't even wait for him to pick up properly. The moment he answered with his usual calm, "Leonard Holbrook," she exploded. "How dare you cut me out of my own husband's legacy? Who the hell do you think you are?" He waited for her to finish. He always did. Then he sighed like a man who'd just been interrupted during a crossword. "I think I'm the man you used to refer to as a walking spreadsheet," he replied. "And now I'm the executor of an estate you abandoned in favor of cocktail parties and betrayal. So let's keep the theatrics brief." "You think this is ethical?" she hissed. "No," he said flatly. "I think it's clean." She laughed bitterly. "Oh, so this is your revenge? Is that it? You and Grant cooked this up together to punish me?" "Revenge," he said, almost amused. "No, this isn't revenge. It's estate hygiene." She went silent. He continued. "You misunderstood the nature of wealth. You thought it was about access. But access isn't ownership. And ownership isn't legacy. What you had, Mrs. Elliott, was proximity. What you've lost is permanence." She tried to pivot. "My daughter's being cut off too? For what? Defending her mother." Holbrook didn't even pretend to argue. "Your daughter made public remarks about destroying the estate after the divorce. She used the phrase clean him out. Twice. That alone triggers clause 9.2. She didn't mean it. She meant it enough to say it, record it, and share it. So unless you'd like to trigger a full reallocation clause, I suggest you inform her that any legal challenge or public slander will result in complete disinheritance, with no chance of appeal." She slammed her hand on the desk. You think you're scaring me? No, Holbrook said calmly. I think you're beginning to realize you never actually held the cards. You were just loud enough to drown out the ones who did. The call ended. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when her daughter, furious, humiliated, desperate, tried to rally the extended family. She reached out to her cousins, aunts, and even Grant's goddaughter, demanding they join her in contesting the will. She called it a legacy theft, but the silence that greeted her was deafening. One cousin replied with a single sentence, I'd tread carefully. The board knows everything. Another didn't respond at all, but forwarded her message to Holbrook's office. Within a day, her daughter's name was quietly moved from probationary consideration to no future eligibility. She didn't know that some of those cousins had stood by Grant quietly during the worst of it, that one of them had once overheard her mocking his boring estate hobby at a fundraiser, that others had simply watched and remembered, who showed up when the marriage fell apart and who danced on its grave. They were named. She wasn't, not because they were better, but because they didn't weaponize betrayal and call it empowerment. That weekend, she tried one more move, a group message to the family chat titled, He's Dividing Us on Purpose. Her words were frantic, emotional, a rallying cry she thought would spark unity. Only 2 people replied. One left the group immediately after. The other sent a thumbs-up emoji and never followed up. The rest? Nothing. Because loyalty doesn't shout. It doesn't need to be loud. It just acts, quietly, deliberately, and when necessary, permanently. That night, her daughter asked her, why aren't they backing us? And for the first time since it all began, she didn't have an answer. They always try something when the walls close in. And for her, the last card wasn't subtle, it was nuclear. The headline hit the tabloid circuit early Tuesday morning, just in time for coffee scrolls and commuter rage. Betrayed wife speaks out. He abandoned me emotionally, then locked me out financially. It was plastered with a carefully selected photo of her from 3 years ago, smiling in a summer dress, soft focus filter maxed out. The article painted her as a victim of manipulation, a woman who gave her life to a cold, controlling man who weaponized money when love dried up. The word coercive appeared 5 times. She thought she'd crafted it well, just vague enough to sound heartbreaking, just specific enough to draw public sympathy. She even included a quote from their daughter, who said, he changed when the money got serious. But money didn't change me. She did. By noon, the story had over 80,000 views. Shares on Twitter. Sympathy comments. Think pieces from blue checks about financial abuse and silent suffering in affluent marriages. For a brief window, she had the spotlight. Again. But this time, she wasn't celebrating freedom. She was rewriting history. And then the floor dropped out. Because what she forgot, no, what she never understood, was that I wasn't reactive. I was archival. By 4:22 p.m., Holbrook's office had released a file archive to a select list of media outlets. They didn't scream. They didn't retaliate with drama. They simply posted a notice. In response to recent defamatory claims, documentation from the Wellington Trust compliance logs has been released. Full transparency available upon request. L.S. Holbrook, Executor. And with that came the receipts. Emails, dating back 16 months, between her and David. Subject lines like, we need to keep timing tight, and he still thinks I'm at work. Voicemails, where she giggled and told a friend, if I play my cards right, I'll get the beach house and the pension. A letter she wrote, never sent, to David, dated during our anniversary week, where she outlined what we'll do once this all blows over. And perhaps most damning of all, a 48-minute audio recording of a dinner she had with her sister, joking about how men like Grant don't notice they've lost until the bank tells them. It was enough. The tabloid took down the article within hours. The retraction was small, buried at the bottom of the site under corrections. No apology, just a line. The claims in our previous story were unverifiable and contradicted by substantial evidence. But it didn't end there. The very next morning, she received a certified envelope, hand-delivered to her condo by a suited man who didn't even take off his sunglasses. Inside, a formal cease and desist order. Defamatory claims, violation of Clause 7.6, conduct-based allocation dispute. From the Crescent Foundation, as legal trustee of the Wellington estate. It wasn't just a threat. It was a trigger, under the terms she had once signed, back when she called it nerdy paperwork. Any defamatory action that endangered the reputation of the foundation or executor could result in direct financial penalties and the suspension of any indirect beneficiary access. Translation: even if someone thought about giving her something later, they now legally couldn't. She tried to contest the order. Holbrook's response was a single sentence. "We welcome your challenge. Please note our discovery file already exceeds 300 pages. Then came the invoice. Damages. 3 digits. Comma. 3 digits. Period. 0 cents. Due within 60 days or subject to civil escalation. She posted nothing after that. Her social media went dark. The daughter who once called me rigid posted a selfie 2 days later with the caption, "Sometimes silence is survival." Her followers assumed it was about love. It wasn't. It was about the moment you realize that every step forward isn't getting you out. It's sinking you deeper into the thing you built, thinking you were invincible. She didn't play her last card. She burned it. The courtroom was cold. Not physically, just atmospherically cold. Like someone had drained all the oxygen and replaced it with inevitability. Even the fluorescent lights seemed dimmer. It wasn't a trial. There were no gasps or cries or gavel-slamming dramatics. Just a probate hearing for final division, clean, procedural, deadly. She arrived in a white suit, tailored within an inch of its seams, as if elegance could still win her something. Her lawyer, Kessler, looked tired. That haunted, law school regret look of a man who'd read the fine print too late and couldn't unsee the trapdoor. Grant didn't say a word, didn't nod, didn't even acknowledge her when he entered. He sat next to Holbrook, who looked as if he might outlive the building. Calm, perfectly still, one hand resting on the folder that had followed them from meeting to meeting, the other on a closed fountain pen. The judge was an older woman with sharp eyes and no patience for theatrics. She flipped through the file, read the key clauses aloud, and then said, in a tone that made even the stenographer shift uncomfortably, Clause 14.2, Clause 9.2, and the Legacy Board oversight provisions under Section D confirm that no contested claim may override an irrevocable foundation-managed trust structure once activated and legally filed. She looked up. Your client's claim is noted. It is also denied. Kessler opened his mouth to protest, but stopped. He turned to her, leaned in, and whispered something only she could hear. Her chin lifted slightly, like she was about to speak. But the words didn't come. She blinked, swallowed, tried again. This time, her lips moved, but no sound followed. Just the faintest squeak of a breath that cracked halfway through. That was the moment it broke. Not the ruling, not the paperwork. Her. All those months of posturing, the articles, the story she leaked, the quiet backchannel pressure she tried to apply through old friends. It collapsed right there, in that silence. Because this wasn't a man denying her. It was the system, the structure she helped ratify. The very documents she joked about signing just to shut him up. The judge turned a page. The Foundation's documentation is comprehensive, time-stamped, notarized, and supported by independent audits. The asset division stands. The rest is not within this court's jurisdiction. Translation: this is final. Across the aisle, Grant adjusted his watch. That's it. No gloating. No visible satisfaction. Just a man marking time, waiting for a formality to end. She turned toward him, finally, desperately. Just to look. Maybe to plead. Maybe to catch some glimmer of connection. Something. He didn't look back. Not once. Holbrook stood, handed a final set of papers to the clerk, nodded to the judge, and walked out with the same quiet presence he walked in with. Kessler gathered his things wordlessly. He didn't touch her, didn't console, just handed her the remaining documents, receipts for fees, a summary of judgments, and a final note. Your representation is concluded as of today. She stood there alone, surrounded by a courtroom that didn't echo, a bench that offered no sympathy, and a man who had turned the concept of loss into art. There was no rescue coming. There was no negotiation left. There was only the sound of the exit door hissing closed behind the man who used to be hers, and wasn't anymore. It came in a simple envelope. No wax seal, no stamp from a court, just her name, typed cleanly, the handwriting too cold to be personal, too precise to be ignored. She hesitated to open it. For weeks after the hearing, she had convinced herself there might still be a back door. A technicality. Maybe a cousin could challenge a clause. Maybe one of the old trustees had a grudge against Holbrook. She'd even floated the idea of appealing to the Foundation's board, until she discovered her name was flagged under non-eligible, conduct clause breach. She told herself it was a mistake. That surely, someone still saw her side. But now the envelope. Inside was only a single page, thick, ivory parchment folded once. cleanly. She unfolded it with shaking fingers. At the top, paper clipped to the letter, was a copy of her own signature. Crisp, dated, notarized, December 17th, 3 years ago, the day she'd signed what Grant had called the family streamlining packet. She hadn't even taken her sunglasses off during that meeting. She'd been rushing to make it to her friend's engagement brunch and had said, while applying lipstick, "Whatever keeps the tax man off our backs, babe." He'd smiled, said nothing. She never knew he'd filed that exact signature under irrevocable estate directive, conduct trigger contingency plan. And now, beneath her signature, printed in Holbrook's mechanical prose, the letter read, "You didn't lose what was his. You lost what could have been yours." There was a pause in the spacing, a breath in paper form. Then, below that, handwritten in dark ink, unmistakably Grant's. "You grinned when she defended your affair. I just smiled when the documents locked." She read it twice. Then again. The first time, she felt her stomach tighten. The second time, her chest. The third, her throat dried out completely. Because it wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't even cold. It was complete. The kind of finality that doesn't slam a door. It erases the hallway. She dropped the paper onto the table, but it didn't feel like dropping something. It felt like setting down a mirror. In that silence, she saw it clearly. Every missed moment where she could have chosen differently. Every chance she had to understand what Grant was building. Every eye roll when he mentioned the trust. Every insult she let their daughter say without correction. Every toast she raised to her own betrayal. She had mistaken his stillness for weakness. She had assumed his silence was a lack of plan. She had forgotten that the man she mocked as boring was the same man who had quietly made his entire fortune disappear from her reach before she even realized it was at risk. And now, there was no call to make. No PR spin to issue. No cousin to rally. No lawyer willing to try again. Just that letter. That signature. And the final realization that what she destroyed wasn't a marriage, a bank account, or a reputation. It was her own future. She stared at the paper until dusk, but it didn't change. And neither would anything else.